So I finally got around to dropping the clutch out of this thing last night. This project, I end up spending more time explaining this car than I do actually tweaking on it. So for you guys who haven't been following from the beginning, let me bring you up to speed on the drivetrain of this thing, and I'll explain some of the reasons that we're doing some of the things here. The object of this car is to go as quick as we can with the 318, stock pistons and stock bottom end, and it's got 273 heads on it, stock size valves. To go as fast as we can with this thing, normally aspirated, and then run it down someplace into the tens on nitrous. At this car's weight, which starting line weight right now is 3275, take about 475 horsepower to do that. And normally aspirated, this motor makes about 375 or thereabouts. So one of the key ways that we're working with this car to achieve these goals is through reduced weight and parasitic drag. So obviously the car's as light as I think we're ever going to get it. Although there are still about 3 or 4 pounds of metal on the clutch cannon under the car that I'm going to get rid of now. But parasitic loss is a big deal. So it's not so much how much horsepower you make, it's how much you get to keep and how much you get to put to the ground. In the name of doing this, we went with the 8 1/4 rear. Follow along because this is important. We went with the 8 1/4 rear, which is a lighter duty version of the full-size Chrysler rear. It's actually still used today in Jeeps and various truck applications. Very popular rear. But we didn't go with the 8 3/4. We stuck with this one because 2 reasons. It's 20 pounds lighter than the 8 3/4, and the pinion sits slightly higher on the ring gear. That's a bad thing and it's a good thing. It's bad because it reduces strength. The lower the pinion, the more strength the ring and pinion has, which is why I like the 9-inch Ford is so strong, because the pinion sits very low on the ring gear. This thing sits pretty high. The good thing is that the higher pinion takes less power to turn. So again, parasitic loss is a big deal with this car. With the starting line weight of 3275, 3270 like that, so the car dry is 3,079 pounds right now, plus my weight, helmet, right, all of that stuff. So at 3275, it should live. And again, small engine, so every little power we can save through that parasitic loss is a big deal. So because of that, we have to be careful how we put the power to the rear axle. A lot of guys, I read through the comments, so many of you, why didn't you use an automatic? Why didn't you use a 727 or a 904? Couple of reasons. The first is that there's more parasitic loss through an automatic transmission than there is to a manual transmission. So you can see probably anywhere like a 904, 18 to 19%, 18-19% parasitic loss. A 727, you're looking at 21-23% parasitic loss. The manual transmission is only about 15 or 16% parasitic loss. Makes a big deal when you've got very limited horsepower to work with. Every little bit that you can save going through the drivetrain counts. So now, we went with an A833 OD box. That's this Jamie right here. So we went with this for 2 reasons. Well, a few reasons. But the 2 biggest reasons is that A, it has a 309 first gear. The normal Chrysler box, the normal close ratio Chrysler box only has like a 277 first gear. So with the deep first gear, in theory, we should be able to launch this thing and run it to the 60 foot on engine because we've got so much torque multiplication, and then start spraying it from that point on. Second gear in this is a big drop. It'll go from like 6,000 RPM to like 4,800 RPM. But if we're spraying at that point, we're using the torque that's available from the spray to actually move the car. So those are the main reasons. And plus it's got an aluminum case. It's about 20 pounds lighter than a standard 833. I actually have a standard ratio aluminum case 833 over there. It's apart at the moment. But I've got that put in here, and I've been tempted many times to just slam it in and go. But the problem is, if I do that, we're not going to learn anything. We're only going to learn, we're only going to find the car's shortfalls by continuing with this box and making things work around it. So, this brings us up to the clutch. The unit I have here I bought new. It's from one of the rebuilders. The application is 1970, 1971 Street Hemi. It's a 10.5-inch disc, Borg and Best style, 3-finger clutch. And the disc that I used, the application for this is just for a truck, because the disc that would go with this is 18 spline, this is 23 spline, so we use a matching disc but with the 23 spline for this transmission. So what we found here, what we found here was that when we run the car on the street, and when we were running the car on the street, playing around with it on the street, with the 750 vacuum secondary carburetor that was on here, we had no clutch problems. I mean, like, you come off the clutch, even easy, and it would just light the tires up, and that would be it. No traction. So without traction, there was no clutch problem. And even banging second gear, it would still break the tires, even with these drag radials on it. So the weak point of the clutch never showed up. Now when we took this car and we put it on the track and it dead hooked, now we have a different story. So the first time out, we had the vacuum secondary 750 on there. And what we found was the car left hard on the flywheel, but as soon as it came to putting any horsepower down, she bogged. I know, okay, it didn't have a big enough accelerator. No, it had the biggest accelerator pump and it had a decent sized shooter. It wasn't a lean bog. It was a don't have enough horsepower bog. But she recovered a few feet after, right, and went into second gear nice and strong. To overcome the bog, I tried slipping the clutch, which got the clutch hot, which didn't allow it to release, and then I banged second gear. So we only got 2 passes the first run, and then we had aborted passes with jammed second gear. So then I went and I put the 850 mechanical secondary carburetor on there. Big difference in the way the car hits. Now it launches off the flywheel and it just tries to drive through the clutch. It just overpowers this clutch. If you watch the videos of the car, on the starting line, it raises the front end and then all of a sudden it just stops and you can hear the motor start to run away. And what I found was when I shifted second gear, it kind of slipped. There was a soft connection all the way through first, and when I hit second, it flared up high, and then when I hit third, it just ran away. Like there was no clutch, right? I didn't cook it. The disc is actually still in very nice shape. It just didn't have the oomph. This cover just didn't have the oomph to hold it all together. Now, it's not the design. The design and the configuration should be about perfect. But I noticed from the very first time I put this clutch in the car and tried to drive it out, that the pedal took almost no effort. It was like a very weak clutch. Now this is all hand fabricated clutch linkage in this car. So I says, well, maybe okay, maybe the ratios are a little bit different. And that's why it feels so light. But no, when we ran it at the track and we found that it wanted to run away, it's not the linkage or anything like that. It's just the fact that this does not have enough clamping force. Now, one other thing, a lot of you guys are like, okay, well, why didn't you use a race disc? Right? There's so many different variations of race discs. We went with a street disc. Now, I'm going to explain the difference between a race disc and a street disc. We went with a street disc because of the fragility of the rear end. Shock loading is what kills rear ends. We don't want to shock load this. We want to be able to come off the starting line very aggressively, almost dropping the clutch, but not quite. We want to come off the starting line very aggressively, but we don't want to bang the rear end. So, in that name, we're using the sprung hub. Okay, so what happens is, this part's actually obviously attached to the motor, and this part's obviously attached to the transmission. And these springs here cushion the blow. So when you take you come off the clutch, before it moves the car, it'll compress these springs, and it adds a little bit of a cushion there. It's actually the same concept as a cush drive on a motorcycle, if you play around with those things. The other difference between a race clutch and a street clutch is that a street clutch has this little wafer in between the 2 friction surfaces. That's called a Marcel, right? A race clutch doesn't have that. But again, that little wafer in there also cushions the blow. It cushions that hit from the clutch being released. But once the car is in motion, that doesn't come into play. These 2 items that define what a street clutch is versus a race clutch don't come into play once the clutch is engaged. This all has to do with just smoothing the engagement. And that all has to do with managing the power to a rear end that shouldn't really do the job. But we're going to make it do the job. So, with that, okay, so just get yourself a good clutch and throw it in the car. Well, I mean, I was already, the other day, I was actually offered a clutch from Hayes. You know, here, take it. You want it for the YouTube channel? Do it. But, yeah, I can do that, but you can't do that. And so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to work with over-the-counter parts, right? Stuff that's, you know, remember, it's extreme budget operation here. We're still under this car for under $4,000. I'm going to keep it as low as possible. So we're going to work with as many lower-end parts as possible and make them work. So, on one of the recommendations from you guys, we heard about a place called Nashville Clutch and Supply. And they rebuild clutches. They do clutches. They do them to spec. So I just called John, who runs the place, a couple of minutes ago, and I asked him if he wanted to take a look at this thing. And he says, yeah, bring it up, we'll see what we can do. So I'm going to take this cover up to him and explain to him exactly what the parameters of the car are, and let's see what he can do with it. And if he feels that he can do something with it, then, that's the direction we'll go. If not, then we're going to have to spring for a new one. So let's go to Nashville. All right, so we come up here to Tennessee Clutch Supply. What's the address here?
1995 Nolensville Pike.
Nolensville Pike. It's like Clutch Oz in there. He's got like everything under the sun. This is John. John, so let me explain what we got going over here. Starting line weight of 3,275 pounds.
Okay.
Approximate power to the wheel about 375. But we're looking to put about 550 through there. I need to keep the disc soft so as to not shock the drivetrain.
Right.
But I need clamp on this.
Okay.
What are we doing?
Okay. Well, what we can do is probably tear it apart here.
Okay. The donut looks good and all of that to you?
Yeah, it looks great actually.
Okay.
Just kind of these levers kind of look like a little abuse, but I can check that out.
Okay.
Rip it apart. I'm going to check the spring ratings.
Okay.
And I'll try to double them out. And it'll give us double the plate load.
Okay. Now, I mean, are there numbers we should be shooting for? Based on the diameter of the clutch?
Based on the diameter, absolutely. Yeah. So what is this? Maybe 11 inch?
10 and a half.
10 and a half?
Yeah. Okay. It's supposed to be a replacement for a street Hemi. Got it from one of the rebuilders. Over the counter thing. Right. But it doesn't, I mean, like I said, the first time I drove it, it just doesn't have the pedal feel that it should.
Okay.
It's soft. It's like a grandma kind of clutch.
Soft.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just standard rating springs in there then?
Yeah. Probably. Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
I can't complain about the action. The leverage and everything is just right. Okay. The release point is just right.
Good. It's still smooth.
Everything's perfect with that. Good. It's just as soon as on the street where there's no traction, car just runs away. Dead hook it, and this thing just wants to
all the way.
All the way.
Okay.
How long? How much?
Tear it apart. Give me about an hour. Change the springs. Build it back. Give me about an hour. Maybe about 2 hours.
Okay. Well, we can come back tomorrow morning.
That's fine.
All right, that'll work.
Plenty of time.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Easy enough.
All right. So that's it. We'll come back tomorrow. We got this thing, throw it in the car, and maybe Tuesday night. You want to come to the track and watch the car run?
Yes. Union Hill, was it?
Yeah.
Where you're running it?
Yeah, because I can use somebody outside. Normally, I like to have other people drive these things, and I like to stand outside and watch what's going on.
Right.
But I could use an educated set of drivetrain eyes on the car.
Listen for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about ears.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.
See you later.
Nice to meet you, man.
And see you tomorrow. Damn, I always end the videos by saying see you tomorrow. You can do it if you want.
See you tomorrow.
There you go.
How about that?